Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. John Ferrera, Ph.D., is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on episode 551 of Boundless Body Radio. John Ferrera, Ph.D., is a neuropsychologist who specializes in psychological and neuropsychological assessment. He has a PhD from the Clinical Neuropsychology program of the CUNY Graduate Center and has been a licensed psychologist since 2010. As a young neuropsychologist in his early 30s, he learned that he had a sensitivity to gluten and was experiencing flare-ups of psoriasis, which led him to examine his own lifestyle. Currently, Dr. Ferrera is the owner and operator of Integrative Neuropsychological Services, PLLC, which he founded in 2012. His specialties include, but are not limited to, autism, dyslexia or reading disability, nonverbal learning disability, and other complex presentations. In addition to his work as a neuropsychologist, he specializes in integrative and functional medicine and offers integrative or metabolic health coaching for individuals and families. Dr. Ferrera is also a certified Kresser functional medicine practitioner and has also completed an ADHD fellowship through the Psychiatry Redefined platform of James Greenblatt, MD. John Ferrera, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, thanks. Thanks so much for having me again, Casey. I'm happy to be here.
It's such an honor to have you back. Your episode that we did the first time generated a ton of interest. We had lots of comments, lots of people talking about it. I thought it was absolutely fascinating talking about some of your area of specialties, including autism, but like we said in the introduction, not limited to, and I'd love to get more into that. But first of all, want to get an update from you. Last time we talked, you were kind of doing a little bit of time in Portugal, and now it sounds like you're spending a little bit more time there. And you've also gotten into surfing, and I know that's one of your passions. Are you to the level of a surfer that you're now tackling the Nazare wave on the regular?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. And I don't think I'll ever be a big wave surfer. That's definitely, I think, a special breed of person, to be able to tackle those waves. I'm still on like 5-6 foot waves, and that's big enough for me.
Not quite 100 feet.
No, nowhere near 100 feet.
Oh man, I've done some longboarding in Hawaii, and I mean, terrible, maybe like a foot or 2 feet, like not much at all. But yeah, the videos of those guys surfing that kind of wave is absolutely insane. The power of all that water crashing down at the same time is absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, they all wipe out, and so like it's you have to be a special kind of person to be able to remain calm in that situation and not suffocate and drown.
Yeah, freak out. Okay, well, we'll ask you again next time we have you on if you've achieved that level. But until then, give us an update. How has it been to split your time between New York, where your practice is, and also Portugal?
It's been great. Yeah, I still have my practice in New York where I do neuropsych evals. Mostly, I do a lot of diagnosing, autism, but other things as well. But yeah, I getting to see it's a very stark contrast between New York City and the small village in Portugal where I am. In many ways, there's no traffic there. Food is relatively clean, the air is clean, and there's much less people, and so it's really really a contrast. But I feel like the contrast is really helpful for us in so many ways. It's how we learn so many different things, and so I was able. That's kind of part of traveling, and seeing the differences in things like autism rates and also just disease prevalence and obesity prevalence. You really start to see wow, something is there's something going on here, where you might not be able to, and so the contrast has been super helpful.
It sounds absolutely lovely over there. I didn't know that you were in a smaller village. Is it the kind of place that I'm imagining that like you're buying food pretty much every day or every other day in like small markets and get to know people pretty well? Is it like kind of that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that small, perhaps, but they have a big supermarket, that we get our food from. But there's one stoplight on the way entering town and one stoplight when you leave the town. That's about it. I was there for the blackout a couple weeks ago, and people, it wasn't the chaos that you might have imagined because it was such a small place. So there's only the stoplights were out, but there's only 2 of them. So it wasn't too big of a deal.
Wow. I didn't hear anything about the blackout. What happened?
Oh, there was a blackout in Spain, Spain, all of Portugal, and part of France, and other places in Europe. But it was yeah, multi-country blackout. That
Wow.
fortunately was only about 12 hours.
Wow. Yeah, no, I didn't hear about that. 12 hours. That's quite a long time. As they
Mm.
say, if you don't watch if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed, and if you watch the news, you're misinformed. I choose the former, and I don't watch the news, so that passed me by. So thanks for that update. I'm glad everything was fine in your town. And
There you go. Yeah, everything was fine.
yeah, that's great. With two stoplights, it would be fine. Awesome. Well, like I said, this topic is so interesting, and I'm so excited to chat about it with you again today. I know it'll generate a lot of interest, and people will be very curious to hear what your learnings have been and your research, especially with that contrast. Like you said, being in a big city and also being in a small village somewhere else where the values seem to be a lot different is very interesting. But after I went back and listened to our original episode again, I really realized we kind of did a flyby on your own health, and it's such an integrative part of your background and how you work with people today. So I was wondering if we could, revisit your story a little bit and maybe go into a little bit more detail about how you landed where you are today with your own health and especially with your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. So, like you said in the intro, I noticed that around 2009-ish that I was sensitive to gluten, and it was just kind of like randomly a relative of mine like was celiac, and so I said, I learned what gluten was at that point, and I was like, let me try it out. And to my surprise, after a few days of cutting it out, I just felt so much better. I had this, brain fog that I was feeling that went away. I didn't even know that I was it was affecting me. But so I went about 2 years without eating gluten, and during that time, I psoriasis started flaring up. And without even making the connection, I cut sugar out of my diet, and then with that combination of no sugar and no gluten, the psoriasis completely went away. And so then it was, from that time, the same way I did with gluten, I would, cheat, and like have some sugar, start cheating on the diet, and the psoriasis would come back. And then I would, eat clean again, and then, it was gone again. So I learned that, I could, mediate, the psoriasis through my diet. And that's what got me into, learning more about the whole, functional medicine field. And I, learned about, Chris Kresser and others, in the space. But as a psychologist, still, it took me a while before I was able to start integrating it into my practice. And then a few years back, when Chris Palmer started publishing his work on the ability of diet to mediate things like anxiety, depression, even bipolar disorder, it became clear that this was very much related to my work as a psychologist. And so I started to get more training, and now I include health coaching as part of my my assessments that I do with all my clients.
Yeah, that's amazing. I always find it fascinating when somebody kind of finds this world intuitively, right? Like it doesn't sound like somebody was telling you that cutting out sugar would be a good idea, or that you had any idea like what a ketogenic diet was at the time or anything like that. You just kind of tried something and it was your own intuition. It must be so interesting to see the improvements in yourself and psoriasis, which is horribly painful, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, more annoying than painful. There's different forms of psoriasis, and so mine was just I would get itchy rashes that would different parts of my body, and so that was it wasn't so much painful as it was not annoying. Fortunately, it didn't progress to become that bad.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Anyway, I just think it's so fascinating to experience that yourself and then discover that there's this whole other world of people that are actually researching this and they've got good information about this, and like the mechanisms explain what had happened to you. And yeah, it must have been amazing, first of all, to find this world, and second of all, to be part of this kind of emerging field of metabolic psychiatry and learning about Chris Palmer and, having your part in that and actually helping people fix things going wrong with their brains through their diet. And it seems like such a foreign concept at first when you're first introduced to it, but it sounds like you also accepted it pretty easy with your own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's kind of like a pattern that repeats itself, where it's like the practitioners who are in this space, they pretty much all have a personal story of their own where they realize the power of diet, to change.
Yeah, definitely. Well, okay. So last time we talked, you were more on the carnivorous side. Is that still the case today?
Yeah, I'm still, eating mostly like animal based, but more like a meat and potatoes type diet. Like I don't stay like strict to the carnivore, and yeah, so I do mix in, some vegetables and some well, mostly potatoes. But my wife is a really good cook, and she'll sneak in a lot of other stuff, here and there. But I still stay. I don't eat any bread. I avoid seed oils, and I limit the sugar as much as I can.
Got it. And then can you comment on your own personal experience with your own mental health? It seems like, the skin issues, gut health, mental health, they all kind of run together. And again, we kind of understand the mechanisms of why that would be the case. But for your own personal, mental health, what have you noticed since kind of transitioning over into this type of diet?
Yeah, then and now. I mean, I myself personally, I struggle with anxiety. I used to have and it used to really get in my way. And when I'm eating clean and when I'm following the diet, it's not an issue at all. And so in my early 20s, I had tried. I was on antidepressants. They didn't work. It's that's one of the reasons why I can see how Chris Palmer and other researchers are getting the results that they're getting, which are pretty remarkable. Like people who have bipolar disorder that don't respond to medications at all, they are on no meds and not experiencing any more bipolar symptoms. And so it's hard to believe when you first start hearing these stories, but then you hear it again and again. So it's like repeatable.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely it's not for everybody though. That's the thing. It's not easy to eat a strict diet, and so I think that's why. And some people don't want to, and so it's not something that I think everyone can have the ability to access.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's a great transition into what you predominantly talk about as far as like autism goes. What had your experience been like to see that changeover in your own diet, understand the mechanisms, and then explain it to people? What was it like to help people who I guess were willing and able to do that transition? And what kinds of things did you see in the world of autism when somebody was willing to address their diet?
Yes, yeah, no, and that's definitely a passion of mine is helping people who do choose this path, and that's like an important I guess thing to note that like that you do have to choose this path, and I think far too often people are just looking for a quick fix, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, I cut out gluten, but it didn't work, and so but did they really cut out gluten, or how did they try it out? And so it's yeah, you really do have to make the decision and commit to it. But there, in the world of the biomedical field of autism, like it's very much related to the functional medicine field in other areas, because it's the same issues that are being addressed, but just to a different scale, and perhaps maybe they tend to have some other issues that the general population doesn't. But the basic philosophy is you want to get the nutrients in, you have to get the right vitamins, and you have to get the toxins out. And so people with autism, individuals with autism are more likely to have trouble getting the toxins out. And so that's one of the issues, is that but their liver isn't functioning correctly, their kidneys aren't functioning correctly, their digestion isn't happening properly, and so they're not getting the nutrients in, but then they're also not able to get any toxins out. And so the approach with them is a little bit you have to look at the reason why. What is the reason why they're not getting the toxins out? And interestingly, a lot of times they have things like yeast overgrowth or parasites, excessive parasites, and so you have to address those issues before you can start getting the nutrients in.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a different approach, but the and the other piece is in terms of the nutrients is that they also have difficulty processing B vitamins. And that's a thing that, lots of other individuals too. And so it might be a genetic predisposition that they have where like a certain mutation on a gene, like one is called the MTHFR gene, that is relatively common. And when you have a certain mutation on that gene, your body doesn't process B vitamins and folate specifically the right way. And so individuals with that presentation, they need to take special types of B vitamins in order to address it. And the interesting thing about that is the carnivore approach, which focuses on like meat, and especially with the specifically with like organ meats, has all of the B vitamins. In addition to other stuff, it also will have, zinc, of course, and, other things as well. And so one way that you can kind of cover all bases with the B vitamins is just by, taking like a liver supplement. And so, an organ meat supplement. And so that's one real efficient way to kind of, cover all those bases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're working primarily with adolescents, is that correct?
No. Lots of preschoolers, anywhere from ages 3, 3 and older.
Okay, gotcha. So for a 3-year-old, they're not necessarily in charge of their diet, right? You have to have the parents on board. The family's got to be on board. What have you noticed as far as compliance or like willingness to take this on? Because you're right, it's difficult for people to be on this diet. I think once somebody gets used to it and understands the benefits, and like you and I kind of stepping away from anxiety and getting on the other side of it to see like, oh, wow, I have way less anxiety now. I don't really want to go back to that. What have you noticed as far as compliance and willingness to take on diet?
Yeah, the biggest issue with kids who are on the spectrum is that they can be extremely picky eaters. And so it's, it's sometimes called ARFID, avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder, would be the actual diagnosis. But these kids, they're extremely picky eaters. They only eat certain preferred foods, and when they're presented with a food that they don't want to eat, they might gag, they might like throw up, and so it's could be very challenging. It's not as easy as just kind of like, you can have the best food in the world and the best chef cooking it, but it won't, you still can't get the food in. And so very often it's a very like slow process, because you have to slowly introduce new foods as you're taking away, problematic foods.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's a big issue. On top of, yes, it's just tough in certain families for them to change the diet. It could be that mom is on board and sees the benefit and does everything the right way, but then if say dad's not on board, or maybe grandma's not on board, then they can really kind of sabotage the whole process.
Yeah,
and so
that makes sense.
Yeah, it can be. So those two things can be challenging, and then dealing with the ARFID. So it is interestingly, oftentimes when kids are extremely picky, they'll have like yeast overgrowth, or they'll have lots of parasites in their gut. And if you address those, which you can address those with different, prescription and also herbal medications, it opens up their palate. It becomes easier to introduce those new foods.
Interesting. I've not heard of that. What are some of the things you can do if somebody has like parasites and digestive issues that you're describing?
Yeah, so there are treatments. So for like both yeast and parasite overgrowth, there's different binders that are used that help the body get rid of the toxins, and then also there is some antibiotic treatment if it's really severe. for the yeast, but then there's also some other herbal medications like biocidin is one of them. There's a protocol using that that will take care of the, and then also of course the yeast, as you know, like candida is also very much diet related, and each feeds on sugar and carbohydrates, and so cutting out or limiting sugar and carbohydrates is very important for a lot of things, but especially for that.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Did you watch the documentary The Magic Pill when it came out?
No, I haven't.
So it was one of the, kind of one of the OGs as far as like documentaries about the ketogenic diet. It's actually kind of hard to find. I think you can find it on YouTube now, but it used to be on Netflix. And part of what they do is they follow a few different stories. And one of the kiddos is, I believe, autistic, somewhere on the scale. And she is eating, your typical chicken nuggets and is super picky with her food, and she is an absolute disaster. I mean, she is so hard on her parents, and her behavior is terrible and throwing tantrums all the time. And they learn about the ketogenic diet, and they're willing to make this transition over, and they start making her like steak, for example. And at first it's like throw the plate, throw the steak, just again, just a total gremlin of a person. But eventually, like through a transition of a few weeks, she starts to eat it. Then she starts to enjoy it. And her temperament that you see on camera, it is amazing. It is completely night and day. She just completely chills out. She doesn't throw tantrums. She will sit and listen and is an absolute sweetheart. And so I would love to do a follow-up with them to see how that is going, if she's still on it. But is that kind of what you've noticed, that like if somebody is willing to go through that transition period, the behavior can be like night and day in some of these kids?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and that's the reason why. And the examples that we have of people who have done this successfully, they're all parents who are doing it out of necessity, because it's they won't sleep through the night, or they're and then waking up everyone else in the house. They can't go out to a restaurant to eat because their behaviors are so severe. And so it's out of necessity that they have to look for different things, and they try different things, and but yeah, it's those are the types of some of the types of improvements that you would see, is just an increase in their tolerance for stress, kind of like their stress cup gets bigger and they're less likely to have a meltdown.
Yeah. I can understand why you're so passionate about that. To see that kind of behavior change must be absolutely amazing, and would definitely motivate you to get up in the morning. I love that. And something we talked about last time that I really want to reiterate that will set up the rest of this conversation is autism rates. Are we better at diagnosing autism, or is it pretty, what I would think is pretty obvious and very clear that something is changing and we're having a lot more autism than we used to?
Yeah, well, both. I mean, to answer your question, yes to both. Like, we are better at diagnosing it. There are more services available, so more people are, seeking the diagnosis. But at the same time, there's no denying that there are so many more, individuals presenting with autism, and especially, unfortunately, low functioning or profound autism, which is, children who are nonverbal, and oftentimes they require, lifelong care. They require a caretaker, and so that's it stands for about 25% or 26% of all new cases that are diagnosed are of profound autism. And I can tell you that, in New York City, the schools that service these kids are thriving. They're busting at the seams. They're creating, new locations, new satellite locations. And so it's, it's a little frustrating to me when I see, because I'll see arguments where people will try to make and say that there's not really an increase, it's just because of the diagnosis, and it's frustrating because I see firsthand how many kids and families are in such are being affected by this.
Yeah, interesting. And I think another key point and a great thing to ask you now that you've had even more experience being between the two is, what do you notice between New York City, where the schools are thriving, versus Portugal? Are you noticing a lot of those same schools popping up in Portugal?
No, I mean, like, yes, they have schools for kids who have autism, but a lot of them are foreign students. There's, so they're not necessarily Portuguese to begin with. But you don't see the levels of profound autism, or at least that, it's definitely, it seems to be much, like it almost non-existent. I want to say I haven't done um, any studies myself. So it's just, but yeah, it does seem to be very different in different places in the world. Contrary to what you would think if you read some research about autism, because if you read research will say that autism is increasing, and it's increasing everywhere.
Right. Got it. Well, I think it's a valid observation and one that you made earlier. And yeah, I appreciate that as well. And it reminds me of something that Nina Teicholz told me once, where it's like, drive around your town and what is the nicest, newest, shiniest building around? And it's an addition to a hospital. It is a cancer center. It is a dialysis center. Like, it is something in healthcare dealing with chronic health issues. We should notice that more and take pause that is the case.
Yeah, or a pediatric cardiac department in a hospital that all of a sudden have popped up everywhere.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. What do we know about the causes of autism? It seems very multifactorial to me, but yeah, with your work, do we know a lot about the causes? What is triggering this?
We don't know the actual cause. I mean, it's definite that it's something in the environment, right? Because it's something that's progressing so quickly and increasing rapidly, and so there's a genetic component to it, but genes by itself can't, don't explain it. But yes, it likely is multifactorial, and of course, one of the main factors that has been pointed to are vaccines, and that's definitely a big one. That's a big, a question mark, right? And I say it's a question mark because there really isn't enough research out there, and so I'm happy to see that we're moving in the direction of being able to ask the question, and that our government and our agencies are doing more research and looking at the question, because it's definitely an important factor to consider.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I really wanted to talk about that with you today. We talked about it briefly last time, and somehow the episode stayed on the internet and we didn't get canceled or anything. It seems like such a weird topic, but that was the main talking point. The questions that we got, the comments that we got were all around vaccines. And I think we both know people who absolutely swear that it was a vaccine that caused it. The kid was fine, got some type of a vaccination, and they were not fine. And there's other people that say there's no conclusive evidence. And so it's a really confusing topic. It's very emotional, obviously. But yeah, what are some of the things that you've learned over the years, and any updates that you might have on that very topic?
Yeah. So I definitely see in my practice lots of clients who their parents notice a regression in their skills. That it's called regressive autism in the literature, where a child starts developing seemingly normal development, and then all of a sudden they experience like a regression in language functioning, or it could also be adaptive skills, like they were going to the bathroom and now they're no longer, or something, a function of something that they lose. And it frequently happens between 18 months and 24, so between right around the 2-year mark. And not always that time, but there's no but yeah, so there's that would be one example of evidence that would make people think that, oh, maybe it's the vaccines that are causing this. So that's definitely something that's very, very real. I think one of the good reasons why where more research is being done into seeing is it the vaccines that are causing this.
What research has come out so far about this?
Yeah, well, so that's the interesting. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, was because I hear so many people be adamant to say, well, this topic has been researched thoroughly and vaccines do not cause autism, and you're an idiot if you think that they do. But unfortunately, the research hasn't been done. And so there's two studies that I wanted to focus on, just because there's really not too many to look at. But there's one study that was done in 2019, and it was in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and it was a cohort study. And most of the studies that are proving that vaccines don't cause autism, they're cohort studies. So what that is they follow a group of people over time who have something in common, a certain characteristic. And so in this case, they used it was in Denmark, and they analyzed health records, and they looked at, it was about 650,000 people, children who were born between 1999 and 2010, and they followed them. And they looked to see how many ended up having autism after about 12 years, I think it was, or they waited. And so what they did with this group was they had some of the kids had an MMR vaccine, and there were some of the kids that did not take the MMR vaccine. They measured the rate of autism in both groups, and it was the same. And so their conclusion was that vaccines don't cause autism. And so, there are so many, things that could be that are wrong with the study. Well, first off, that they're only looking at the MMR vaccine. They're not looking at anything else. And then they generalize to all vaccines, or that's kind of like the way that people interpret the data. But, there's no control group. And similar to lots of research that was done to prove that cigarettes don't cause cancer, they didn't look at any other factors. It was just an associational study that looked at only the MMR vaccine. So you don't know what other vaccines did these children take. And so maybe it could still be something that's vaccine related.
Interesting. Wow. And I have to just say, wherever you are on the political spectrum of having, state-run healthcare, for example, I know taxes in Denmark are through the roof, but they provide healthcare. And because they do that, they get mountains of data on all kinds of things that they can look at. So that on the one hand is kind of cool that they're even looking at it. But yeah, that was the first thing I was questioning. That's only the one vaccine. The schedule of vaccines that you're supposed to get is quite long and starts quite young. And so you wonder, I got an MMR vaccine, I got a polio vaccine, I got the ones that we kind of think about. It's just it's so difficult to say if you're only looking at one and not certain others, could it still cause harm, some of these different vaccines? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's the combination of vaccines, because they're not just getting one, they're getting 6 at a time when they go for a well check at 18 months or so. It's multiple vaccinations at one time. And so that's a problem. Could be a problem, and it's something that this study doesn't address. The other thing is that in their population, as I was preparing for this talk today, look, they had it was 650,000 children who they analyzed. 6,500 had autism. Well, if you do the math, that turns out to be 129 per 100,000, which is much lower than the rate of autism, right? In Denmark at the time, or now, it's at least 1 in 60, maybe lower, which would be 1,600 out of 100,000.
Wow.
So, that's just, I don't know that even that sample is, representative of the general population in terms of the variable that they're studying.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there anything else we want to cover in that study before we go to the second one that you referenced?
No. It's a good transition from that study. That study, how it doesn't have a control group, and you might ask, well, how come it doesn't have a control group, right? And so there's the second study is it's a 2009 study by Paul Offit. It was a journal series that was edited by Stanley Plotkin, and those are two of the main doctors who are behind the vaccine development. Wait, I should say the first study that I just mentioned, it was funded by Novo Nordisk.
Side note.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. So this next article, which is written by, doctors who stand to profit and as well, but they it was just a 5-page article that spoke about, that like talked about, how vaccines were safe. And in the last section, he addresses multiple vaccines, and talks about how it is safe to give multiple vaccinations, and he like gives his all theoretical evidence for why that's safe. And then he goes on to say, like, in this, like, specifically, no studies have compared the incidence of autism in vaccinated, unvaccinated, or alternatively vaccinated children, meaning like children who would have spread out the vaccination or delayed them in a certain way. So, so he says clearly that no studies have been done, and the reason why, too, he said they would be difficult to perform. One is that it would be unethical. So you can't do that study because you would be denying vaccines to a group of people, and you can't do that because that would be unethical. What about studying a group of people who just chose to not?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. Well, you can't do that because of that would expose to differences in healthcare seeking behavior. And yeah, differences in healthcare seeking behavior amongst those groups. And so, so you can't do a study on, say, the Amish, like we spoke about last time, who, seemingly have, very low rates of autism. You couldn't do a study on the Amish because that would, yeah, I guess because they have differences in healthcare seeking behavior, I guess. I don't know. But my point of bringing that second study up is because it kind of like answers our questions. Like, everyone says that, the research is so strong, but this clearly is just stating that no, actually it's not. And we're going to, we say it right here. There are no studies that compared, the incidence of autism amongst these different groups. And we can't do it because it's unethical.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That reminds me of a podcast I listened to. I believe it was Revisionist History that talked about the Minnesota starvation experiment. And yeah, ethically, you can't starve people, but these were people during World War II who were conscientious objectors to the war, and they wanted to serve in some way. They just weren't going to go to the battlefields and shoot other people. And so they were already going to do starvation and protest and fast and whatever. And they made the correlation between that and, when COVID was raging and people wanted to get, injected with COVID so that they could, test different treatments and whether or not that was ethical or not. So I find that very interesting. And yeah, that doesn't sound like very strong evidence either way, especially if it's funded by industry. Okay, so I guess maybe this is speculative, maybe it's a little bit personal, but I want to ask you where you stand on this. Your kids are adults, right?
Yeah, I have one child. He's 17.
Okay, gotcha. If you had a child right now, how would you think about this? How would you personally approach this, knowing what you know?
I would, as a parent right now, like, there would be a couple things I would do. One is I would make sure that my metabolic health was intact, right? Because when you talk about causes, it is multifactorial, and there is research to show that, at least the research is on maternal metabolic health. But when moms have, metabolic dysfunction of different sorts, like, it can lead to increased rates of autism and ADHD in their children. So I would definitely want to make sure my metabolic health was good. I would want to have a natural delivery if I'm able to, as opposed to a C-section delivery. I would want to breastfeed, make sure that I'm able to breastfeed. And as far as, to answer about the vaccine, I would, find a pediatrician who would support spacing vaccines out, who would allow me to make multiple appointments for a vaccine instead of like doing them all at once. And one who wouldn't, force me to take ones that weren't required or weren't necessary.
Yeah, sure. You hear about the hepatitis B shot given on the day of birth, which is like,
Yeah,
I don't think that's necessary.
it's yeah. I mean that's the one that clearly makes no sense. Amongst others, but that's definitely that's yeah, that one makes no sense. It's a sexually transmitted disease. Moms are all tested for hepatitis B, so that they don't have it. Yeah, it's there's no need to introduce the risk of any side effects.
Yeah. The kid's in a pretty bad place if he's already sharing needles on his first day on planet Earth. You know what I mean? Like, seems like we could
I don't
push
know.
that one
It's
out.
pretty impressive if
Yeah,
gets to
seriously.
that on his first
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, pretty edgy. Okay, well, I really appreciate that. And again, as we kind of set this up, like it is a difficult topic and it is very emotional. So I appreciate that opinion. Before we move on, is there anything else you want to comment as far as the vaccines and what these studies are saying or not saying?
No. I think we definitely. I guess I want to say that I think that we really do need more research on the causes of autism, and specifically, like, some people might be more susceptible to it. And so, like, the genetic research, all the genetic research that's been done, it's not, which most of the research has been focused on looking for an autism gene. And so we have a lot of research on autism genes. I think now we can start correlating that to different outcomes, and we could start learning a lot about, about how the body functions.
Yeah, that's fair. I really appreciate that. And I think you and I both appreciate like following the genetic part of this is important, but by and large, in pretty much every other field that we've looked at, cancer, what have you, like we're, yeah, it's great that we're doing that research, but it's also like we're ignoring the metabolic health picture, which should be more foundational, and I believe would make a much bigger dent in some of that stuff. So thank you for that discussion. I really, really appreciate that. And you used a word earlier that I'm not very familiar with, and I believe it was the biomedical side of kind of autism treatment. This is something you're an expert in and something I'm completely novice in. Can you tell us what that is and what the components are?
Yeah. And so I'm becoming an expert, but I'm not. I'm still learning every single day. But no, but that is looking at very similar to the functional medicine approach, but looking for biological and metabolic markers in the body that and using testing and addressing them in a systematic way. And so we mentioned a little bit earlier that a lot of kids who are picky eaters, say, or others, they will have. It turns out they have excessive parasites or yeast buildup. They have heavy metals that have accumulated that their body can't get rid of because their drainage system is clogged. And so there's the biomedical approach looks. It's a systematic approach to to detox those things while at the same time getting the nutrients in.
Gotcha. What kind of markers are you looking at?
So it's things like different markers, but a lot of the same functional medicine tests. So stool tests to look at to detect parasites, heavy metals. Or there's other tests also to detect heavy metals. But early on, especially in the autism world, there are DAN doctors. It stands for Defeat Autism Now, and they were doctors who they really kind of like spearheaded this whole approach. But they using the philosophy that, or the idea that this was primarily being driven by toxicity, by heavy metal toxicity. They started by just starting with the detox right off the bat, and it's the same thing that a lot of times parents will do today too, where they learn about, okay, autism. I have autism. Maybe it's because of heavy metals. Because there's lots of evidence to suggest that a lot of like the heavy excessive like stimming that kids do. You also see that when people have mercury toxicity or other heavy metal toxicity, it looks exactly the same as like an autism stimming. And so for those reasons, people start to kind of like try to detox right away, and it wasn't working, because if your drainage system is clogged and you take the metals out, then they're gonna release from the tissues or whatever organs they were in, but they can't leave the body, and so then they wreak havoc, and so it makes the problem worse, instead of making it better. And so the approach involves going slowly, but also making sure that you're addressing things like yeast, parasites, while at the same time making dietary changes like gluten-free, dairy-free are two that are important for kids who are on the spectrum. And the other toxin that I didn't mention, pesticides. Pesticides from food, like that's another one that there are different binders and chelating agents that are used as part of the biomedical approach for autism, and in addition to taking things like mercury and other heavy metals out, they also can help remove pesticides and other which some of those are heavy metals too.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's like you said, you want to take away the toxins and you want to add in the nutrients, and that can be done both at the same time, which is great. I think nutrition obviously is such a huge part of the way somebody would detox. But what are other treatment methods? Like what other practices, lifestyle practices, can these people be thinking about? And are any of them as effective, in your opinion, as nutrition is?
Well, yeah. So sometimes, like with, for instance, we mentioned B vitamin signaling is problems with processing B vitamins in general is very common in children who have autism, and so sometimes that can be addressed by diet. But oftentimes there are specialized B vitamins, like leucovorin is a specialized, a highly concentrated form of vitamin B9 that is a prescription that is given, that is sometimes necessary, or sometimes kids or individuals, they'll use B12 shots, injections, vitamin B12 injections, and so sometimes there are things like above just eating correctly that is required. But
Gotcha.
At the same time, I think that someone who does eat is able to figure out that personalized diet that works well for them. That could be the a really effective way to get all your nutrients that you need. Because when you're say if you're following the carnivore diet, then you're getting all your vitamins and minerals because you're eating like all the nutrient dense food. If you avoid dairy, one of the reasons why avoiding dairy is important is because dairy conflicts with the folate process. And so if you already have a problem processing B vitamins, like I actually happen to have one of the MTHFR mutations, and I do better without dairy. Unfortunately, I mean, I just did like a 2-year stretch where I was eating cheese, and I just stopped like a couple of weeks ago, and I feel so much better. I love cheese, but it doesn't have any gluten in it, but so it doesn't give me psoriasis, but I feel like I function better without it. I think part of the reason is because it does affect that, that folate or that B vitamin, pathway.
It's kind of that idea that, like, yes, if you're eating a good, clean diet, you're going to have all the nutrients you need, but it also depends on the context of if you're starting out with deficiencies, you're going to need something else. You are going to need to supplement with something a little bit more powerful that is targeted and very specific. It doesn't mean like, go to your local drugstore and get a multivitamin, but work with a practitioner who can get you the right supplements for the right reasons. So you're not just wasting a bunch of money or thinking that like a diet's going to fix deficiencies necessarily.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, it's important to work with a practitioner and a coach and get and if you're able to have the testing is. I feel like the testing is important because you have to just so that you can monitor progress, and then also there might be certain things, like if you have excessive yeast overgrowth, then there are certain, then you have to avoid carbohydrates. And so like a lot of families on the autism spectrum, or, a lot of, families, they'll make their own yogurt. to help, with like different probiotic strains, because it's, something that it's an effective way to get those probiotics in, and also other calories too, because kids, they need to eat, and if they're a picky eater, like, you find some yogurt, you can sneak a lot of like vitamins and stuff into it. But if you have too much yeast, then you can't use inulin. Inulin is commonly used in that yogurt as a starter, but if that might make it worse, right? And so, like, knowing those things, that, doing the testing is important, and then also being able to monitor changes in vitamin levels. Like if you have low B9 and you're taking leucovorin to address that, then you want to be able to measure it again to be able to know if is it working or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Any other lifestyle factors, or is it just a lot of the stuff that most of us already know about, like being outside, fresh air, sunlight, grounding, exercise, any of that kind of stuff?
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because those lifestyle factors are also, extremely important. Like getting outside, getting sunlight is important. And for times when they can't, red light therapy is something that is helpful. A lot of families will also incorporate that into their regimen. And then also, sweating, which a lot of times you don't think about, like making sure a kid is going to sweat, but that's something that really helps, promote the detox pathways, especially when someone is starting out in the detox phase. It's important to make sure all the detox pathways are working, and so you have to make sure they're not constipated, and also having opportunities for sweating.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Will you contrast the kinds of results that you see with families and parents and the children that are willing to try some of these lifestyle factors versus what somebody might experience in the normal standard of care?
Yeah. So there are. It's super exciting but also super frustrating, because there are some people who they start their journey off in the biomedical field and they make huge progress and fast, and kids start speaking and they stop stimming, and it all happens like very quick. And first they do the diet and they see an improvement, and they move on to the next step, and they just keep seeing improvements. Then there are others who do all those same steps but don't see any dramatic improvement, and so they won't start speaking. But in those cases, like we were saying earlier, they will stop. Maybe they'll stop self-harming. They won't be banging their head against the wall or hitting themselves when they get frustrated. They don't run away from their caretaker or run out of the classroom in school. And then as they get older, they're able to, tend to their adaptive skills. They're able to, go to the bathroom independently, shower independently, which has a huge impact on just overall quality of life for the family and for the child. More often than not, the child will still, you're not curing autism, you're not removing neurodiversity, but you're, optimizing functioning and just, helping them, just improving their overall quality of life and well-being.
Yeah, I would think it would be the same as it is in so many other things, where if you get the diet right, maybe the other treatments work way better, like you said, or the family's getting better, or the kids at the very least don't also have fatty liver and are developing prediabetes. There's so many other side benefits that come along with that. And yeah, even if you're not curing the autism, at least you're making it a lot better, and with a huge laundry list of side benefits as well for not only the child but also the family.
Yeah. And on the other end of that, to finish answering your question, the kids, if you don't do this approach, then you're left with, you can get your child in the best possible school. If you go to the psychiatrist, they'll give you medication, for, the behavior. Usually it's like a Risperdal or another medication that's actually going to have a negative impact on metabolic health and make you more likely to develop fatty liver disease, obesity, and all of those things. Make it harder to implement any low carb diet or any special diet. Increase the pickiness of the eating. But at the same time, those are the kids who they they basically stay the same. Like I do, IQ testing, and they'll be at the same cognitive level at 20 as they were when they were 9.
Wow.
And so it's it can be without without that. Yeah, it's very hard to make progress.
Wow. Well, I can just tell why you're so passionate about this. This is amazing work that you're doing, and I love how excited you are about it and passionate, like I said. Is there any questions I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, just that the whole the I think that we're learning a lot about just functioning in general, and a lot of these toxin removal, using the binders to get rid of pesticides, and also heavy metal accumulation. It's these are, I think, strategies that other people can benefit from as well, because we're all exposed to the same pesticides, and so it's something that I think more and more people are starting to look at that. But I think that's going to be like another piece of the whole functional medicine puzzle in a couple of years. Is I think a lot more people are going to be talking about these methods to remove parasites and heavy metals.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a cool time that we live in. It's a challenge, as we said, like, because this is on the rise and is becoming more prevalent, but there are other treatments. And yeah, people like you that are pioneering some of this stuff and getting it out there to the children and the families and all that stuff. It's awesome. It's really inspiring that you were able to find your own, health through your diet for yourself, and then to be able to share that with others is fantastic. And I'm so glad we were able to reconnect, and so glad that you were able to take the time to be on our show today, man. It's so fun to catch up with you. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
You can go to my website, which is inpnyc.com. Yeah, that's I don't have too much of a social media presence. I'm gonna, goal is to start ramping that up, but so I'm on my to-do list.
I don't know, man. I don't know if I'd encourage you to do more social media than you're already doing. You're not really missing out on too much, let me tell you.
Okay, all right. Well.
Last question. How is your Portuguese coming along? Are you learning any Portuguese from being in Portugal?
A little bit. It's coming very slowly. I can read really well. Starting to be able to pick it up, but
Okay.
It's especially in the south of Portugal, they have their own dialect. They don't pronounce all of the vowels, and so it's especially hard in the southern Portugal.
Yeah. Yeah, the part I lived in Brazil had a lot of influence from people in that part of Portugal, like the fisherman type, and they would talk so quick. And yeah, it is a slow process, man. I basically passed Duolingo in Portuguese and didn't have any further lessons. So I started to try to pick up Spanish. And even though the two lessons or the two languages are pretty close, it is a snail's pace that I'm learning Spanish. It is very, very slow process, but it's great you're picking things up and at least able to read and hear some things. That's very encouraging.
Yeah, so slow. It's about moving, like, just kind of like my surfing is progressing at like a similar, like a snail's type pace.
Yeah,
it's
the snail's pace
progressing.
all the way up to the Nazare wave, which you can tell us all about next time. We can't wait to hear about that. Dr. Ferrera, thank you again so very much for all of your amazing research and your amazing work. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate you.
Thank you, Casey. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. Such an honor to have you again. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.